Okay, it's 2:18. So let's get started again. Is everybody back? I just see all names and no faces. Oh, there's Stacy. Gabriel.
Hey, Peggy.
Yesy.
Someone sent me, someone sent me a question asking about a timeline for the appointment of an educational liaison. And, I just went back and checked the law, and it does not give a timeline of when an educational liaison should be appointed per se, except that it should be at the shelter care hearing. So I provided them a link with the law, but I just wanted to let everyone know that in case anyone else had that question.
Thank you.
I'll just add too that it should be determined. It's probably not going to happen at the shelter care. They usually don't check that box for whatever reason because they don't have enough information. But it is certainly something that if it needed to be, could be addressed at the 30-day shelter care or any of the review hearings too, if one hasn't been named. But that's definitely something to talk about. Yeah. Stacey?
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. No, I was going to say that's great because I used to be a CASA a long time ago, and I remember it took a while for things to get done. So I looked at the law and was like, shelter care hearing may not happen, but that's the law. So I was just citing it.
Yeah. And again, like you guys are saying too, it defaults to the parents. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. So.
Right. Savannah, can you go to the next slide? This is the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to talk about best interest determinations. And
talk about a build-up, Peggy.
I love this picture, and so I'm excited. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Before I throw this over to Debbie, I just want to remind everybody, and I've said it a million times, this is in federal law and state law. So here, these are the ESSA provisions. There must be a best interest determination. Next slide. And this is the state law. And again, this is state law on the education side, although there's an RCW on the child welfare side that references this RCW. So they're really all combined. And this one really provides details and clarification as to how these best interest meetings should look. The law spells out who should be there, and Debbie's going to talk more about that in just a second. It clarifies that we should be using student-centered factors in making these decisions. And it makes really, really clear that the student must remain in the school of origin while the determination is being made. And so now I'm going to hand this off to Debbie, who is our best interest determination pro. She has organized and participated in many of these meetings. And please, if you have questions as we go along, stick them in the chat. I'll watch the chat box and I'll interrupt Debbie if there are questions. Go for it, Debbie.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Peggy. So as we've all talked about best interest determination meetings, and as an educational advocate here in Region 3, I cannot say enough about these meetings. I think they are great transitional meetings that help our kids do the best transition possible when we're talking about moving from school to school. So some of the key players in this process are the DCYF caseworker, the CASAs, or other interested parties, the student, if they're age appropriate, the bio parents, and the current caregiver. The other thing that's included is the school. And I want to be sure to emphasize, when you do best interest determination meetings, you are talking about staff at the school of origin and the potential new school, if that is being considered. Both schools must attend, because it's not helpful for the school of origin to be talking about how the child did if the new school isn't present and doesn't have any additional information. Best interest determinations, as long as I have run them, have been great because the school district staff, which includes maybe their IEP case manager, the director of special education, their, special ed teachers, or the child placing agency case managers all know that child. And really, it's a time to share information going back and forth between the schools around what is working, what hasn't, what have they tried, what are the glitches that come with delivering those IEP services. And I cannot tell you, I'm very grateful for school districts sharing the detailed information that they do on children, because they really do help that transition. I hear directors of special ed going, what happens? What kind of behaviors are you seeing before things escalate? How do you calm him down? Do you need someone to take him for a walk? Do we get him out of the classroom? All those things are not necessarily listed in the IEP, but those are behaviors and intervention strategies that have been learned over time in working with the child. So that information is critical as we explore possibilities of moving a child's school of origin. Next slide. Some things to be considered as even you as a CASA can be requesting a best interest determination meeting if you really are thinking the school district, for example, is not meeting that child's needs. So some of the things I staff with DCYF workers are, how old is the child? The big factor here is the length of placement. As you all know, we have receiving care, we have night to night, we have a lot of different type of placements that can impact his school education and where he is placed. We have, so often I hear of kids going to 30-day placements. And at that point, I'm pretty adamant that we not change the school, because we would be changing it twice. If that child, for example, lives in Region 3 in Snohomish County in the Everett area, goes to a 30-day placement in Tacoma, but may be coming back here to Snohomish County for a longer-term placement. Those things are all critical as far as determining what kind of placement the child currently is in need of. Special needs. What are the services? I'm seeing, as I staff these cases, more and more autistic children that have very specific needs and need additional supports outside of the school setting. And so we want to make sure everyone's working together. They're also a key element to your best interest determination meetings when you're trying to figure out where all the extra support services coming from. Other thing to think about is timing in the school year. Sometimes it's 2 weeks before the end of a break or 2 weeks before the end of the school year. We try and make sure that we can keep that child maintained in that school until a natural school break occurs, if at all possible. We look at grade level. When we talk about school placement, we're also talking about pre-K classes that are connected to the school district. If they are pre-K kids in preschool connected to a school district, they can have an IEP or a 504 that transfers with them. And at that point, a best interest determination meeting needs to be held as well. Also looking at their existing connections. Who are they connected with? How long have they been at the school? What teachers do they confide in? I will share an example with you. We had a child on the islands, and the only placement we could find for him was in Lake Stevens. It was a short-term placement, so we chose not to move his school, but we worked with the school in providing a laptop with the current placement being helpful with the teachers. And then he was also able to FaceTime the teachers that he was very well connected with on the island, just so that he didn't lose contact, because he didn't understand the concept of a different school or a different teacher until we were able to find a stable placement for him. So those are all things to think about. If it was your child, what would you want to think about? Next slide.
Hey, Debbie.
Yeah.
Does that also include Head Start and maybe even daycare?
Not necessarily daycare. The only way it would be pre-K is if it's connected with the school. We can work, I mean, we're not required to do a best interest determination meeting for kids that are in private preschools. But, you know, we can get information shared back and forth about what worked for him.
Okay. So Head Start would be eligible if it was connected to the school?
Yes.
It would have to be administered by the school district. So
district,
some Head Start programs, they may just rent a classroom space, but the school district is not part of administering that program. Then that Head Start program would not have to follow these federal provisions about school of origin rights or best interest determinations. But if it's a school district program, then absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, best interest considerations. It's really important to talk to the schools. Why this school versus another school? What kind of supports are provided in that school? I will tell you, so many of our foster youth are so connected to their teachers in their school. They're the ones that have been the most consistent, care about them, you know, express those, check in with them daily. We have building points of contact that also do that with them, especially when they know they're going through some challenging times. It's been great to see teachers step up when kids are removed. Often as the educational lead, I hear from the teachers and the school district liaisons that we may have gone in and removed the child from the home first because they're immediately aware of what's going on in that family dynamic. So that's important. We also need to take a look at the academic, social, emotional, special ed services, and any medical services that are needed. Where can the child get those supports to help them succeed in school? Sometimes, depending on what either the health or emotional supports that are needed, can a different school provide that? And especially in special ed, one of the things we always look at is sometimes they need one-on-one case aides or paraprofessional, but the other thing is sometimes they need a behavioral program that is very, very small, like 3 or 4 kids in them. And not every school and not every school district can provide that because of the level, how big their district is. So that is a large consideration when school districts don't have that specialized supports. And what is the permanent plan when we talk about best interest? That's almost the first question I ask the worker. How permanent is this placement? You know, a lot of times I'll be told it's a pre-adoptive home and the child's hopefully going to remain there. Then that makes sense. Other times, you know, it's very temporary. The relative has agreed to take them short term, but have made no long-term commitments. So that's something else to think about. Those are all the kind of things that as a court advocate, you can ask those questions. I would also encourage you, if you're involved in any staffings, to ask that question. What's the long-term plan? Have we done a best interest determination meeting for the child if we're moving him to a different school? Can the school meet that need? Every school district is different. Every school district assigns students to a school depending on their needs, their neighborhood, and other factors. And so as a department, we always provide the school district with the address and some of the needs that the child has so that they can give us some idea if it's a neighborhood school or if it's one that they will need to be bused to. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So this is a school notification form that is required by the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And this is submitted every time a child moves placement. There's a change in a caregiver or a social worker, or if there's any kind of court action taken where there's a no contact order. So this is what the social worker completes. It goes to the school of origin where the child is at, the student's name, the caregiver's contact, if there's any type of no contact order, and at the very bottom of the form is transportation arrangements. So the worker, every time the DCYF worker moves them, they must submit this form to the school liaison. I strongly encourage people not to leave it at the building, because sometimes, like Peggy and others were saying, sometimes the school secretary or the registrar doesn't always know where to send these forms. And it's imperative that the school liaison monitoring foster youth have this information. They put this information into the computer, and it is flagged as foster or relative care placement. Just for your information, how this also works is, as I understand from school district people, the caregiver is listed as family number 1 in their database, and that indicates that they are the first person to be contacted. They are the ones that receive all the blast emails about weather changes, bus transportation, school closure, non-planned school closures. The second person listed as family number 2 is the social worker. So if there's any questions about the child, or if somebody should be picking them up or not, either the caregiver or the social worker would be the one that gives authorization. And family number 3 then becomes the bio parents, that they can still get information about the education and get invited to meetings and so forth. So those are important things to add and make sure that these forms are being submitted to each school district. It's like an emergency contact. So we want to make sure they know. Because sometimes I have had situations where parents will show up and I'll get a call and says, I thought he was in foster care. Mom's trying to check him out of school. And I said, hang tight. I called the office and say, does mom have authority to be picking up the child? And they go, no. So those are really important factors in maintaining safety for our kids in foster care. Next slide. In the back of this form, this is page 2 of that form, is a checklist for decision making, and it talks about the things we were discussing in the best interest determination. What's the distance? For example, the commute on the child, if we maintain them at their school of origin. I've gone as far as a child in the Edmonds School District living in Tacoma, but because it was his senior year, we all agreed that that was the best place for him. He wanted to graduate with his friends in his school. We made arrangements for transportation to and from for the last year, and he attended and he graduated. So those are things that we need to think about if we have kids that have behavioral challenges, being on a school bus, even a small school bus, that are having challenges that may need a para, that may not be available. Those are all factors in the overall decision-making about where the child should go. And so that's why it's important to have all those parties present that can, share information about what they know. We've had kids in specifically designed like seat belts so they can't move around in the bus for their safety. There are a lot of things for consideration when we're doing a best interest determination meeting. Okay, next. So the short-term plan, we have that here in Region 3, for example, and I'm sure other areas have it as well. We have what we call a receiving center. And for those of you in this area, it's called the Bridge. And when they are in 30-day short-term receiving care placements, we rarely move them because they're probably going back to the area in which they came from. But we need 30 days to maybe check out to see what the CPS complaint is about, if it's valid or not, or if there's enough safety concerns that the child should remain out of the home. This is a form that I would encourage people to think about if you have, if you have people receiving care facilities in your area. What can the facility do to help enhance the child's education? But we really need to talk about how do they get it virtually? Do we send a hard copy packet of homework to them once a week where the staff at the group home help them and then send it back? How should the communication occur? And who's the teacher that they should be coordinating with? So this is some of the areas that we like to cover. We send that to the school of origin for the child in that short-term placement. and have them work together on that. I saw a question in the chat. Hold on.
Yeah, I'll read it to you, Debbie.
Okay.
When a social worker moves from this position and a new social worker comes aboard, does that new social worker fill out the form with his or her information and give it to the school liaison?
They should be. The other thing is, if it's just a change in social worker, the other thing you can do is send an email to the school district liaison saying, I'm now carrying this case and here's my contact information. If nothing else has changed. Because often as the school liaison person with all the school districts in our area, I often get told, okay, I'm getting a returned email saying that staff is no longer there. Who's the assigned staff? And we can help as well when that doesn't happen, but that's an area that we're still working on. Any questions around your best interest determination meetings or things that you've come across? Has everyone participated in bid meetings?
I haven't yet. I've got a toddler right now. It's my first case, so this is all very new to me.
Okay. That's good. And the more people we have on board saying, okay, we need to do a best interest determination meeting, it's required by law, the better our kids are going to get served.
I have a question as well. I'm hoping you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how often is there actually follow through with having these best interest meetings? I recently had a case with it was 5 kids, but 3 were school aged across elementary, middle school, and high school. And 2 of the children moved twice and moved school districts twice. And we had a team meeting around the children moving, but there was no conversation about best interest as far as moving districts. And because one of the students had an IEP, when she moved the second time, I, as the advocate, helped make sure that the teachers knew and that there was communication between the two, but like the social worker hadn't been communicating with the school. Teachers and staff didn't know the school was transitioning. And there was never a meeting. None of those meetings ever involved a staff from the school. And so I'm really curious as like, do other advocates have a similar experience to mine, or do we feel like this is happening pretty regularly? And my particular case was random.
It depends on the area.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sarah, what do you know what DCYF region you're in?
I serve with Pierce County, so
Okay.
Not sure.
Region 5.
Region 5. So remember when I said this is a work in progress? It really is. And I think your experience is probably not uncommon. And that's part of the reason we wanted to focus in on this with all of you, because we see you as a mechanism for making sure these meetings start happening. And I think, you know, logically, we can all see, of course, you want to have a meeting to talk about school, but historically, that hasn't been the case. Historically, they move the child to a new foster home and they tell the foster parents, enroll them in your neighborhood school. And that's just the way it's been. And it's really hard to undo, you know, those long standing habits. And so the other piece of it is that social workers do not receive any training on educational stability. They don't know what the requirements are as part of their onboarding to become a social worker. So Shanna's been doing a good job of trying to get this information out to social workers, but it's not part of their required training. So that's kind of why we're looking for other avenues to get this information out.
So if I could, this is Tony Huff. I just want to give a shout out to the Ording School District recently had a meeting with those folks on a kid transitioning into the high school. And they did a fantastic job of bringing people together. Of course, it was all online, but we had really good representation from lots and lots of folks. So, and they moderate the thing that was impressive about it is that they moderated the meeting very well. So we got all the things needed to get done. So just a shout out to Orty.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, that's really great. And I want to mention that, you know, depending on where people are in the state, these meetings can look a little different. Sometimes they happen on the phone. Sometimes they're Zoom meetings. Like it sounds like, Tony, that's what you maybe did. Sometimes they're in person. The big thing is making sure that school folks are involved in that conversation.
So I wanted to go back to the gal that was asking about these meetings and not, you know, her area and not having them. One of the things I would think about is as these kids are moving around, it's really important to ask, have we done a school meeting? You also talked about a family team decision-making about the placement move. And the reason I would say that it's really hard to do a best interest determination meeting and a FTDM is because you have different players there. As Peggy indicated earlier, sometimes you're talking about what the child needs for placement and support, or, you know, if something's going a little cockeyed. But the bottom line is you need to have both schools, a sending and receiving school there, because they are the key players. When you have a best interest determination meeting, what I like seeing is one school district who already has had them says, I'll send this to you right now, your IEP. Because generally, until the official transfer occurs, the school district that is receiving him doesn't have any indication of an IEP, what the services are, and how they need to set up his classes. And at the same time, they're still required by ESA to enroll him immediately. So the more information and the faster a best interest determination meeting can happen, the better the chances of the receiving school being able to support a program for that child. And that's where, when these things don't happen, it gets to be quite challenging. I mean, we recently had a court order a child move to a different school before we could even do a best interest determination meeting. And within 3 days, the child was suspended. And that was before I even knew that he had moved. And so that's the challenge in moving them before a best interest. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll pass
Debbie,
it.
thank you so much for that. Okay, Shanna.
Thank you all, and good questions along the way. So we're going to do a breakout session, and we have a scenario, and we're going to put that up in the chat, and I'll read it as well. But just this is an opportunity to kind of look at a scenario and who needs to be there, what questions need to be asked. So kind of putting what we've just been talking about kind of into practice. It'll be small groups of about 5 or 7, so you should have a chance to really kind of dig in for a few minutes. So what we're looking at is a 10-year-old currently residing in a foster home in Renton School District. She has had great, oh, there we go. I was looking at another screen. Okay. She's had great challenges in both school and her current placement. Placement is disrupted, and she has moved to another foster home in the Federal Way area. She's behind at least 1 grade level and has an IEP that she is currently being reevaluated for. DCYF hopes to return her to her mother with in-home BRS services to see if they are able to stabilize her rather than continue to move her from home to home. The plan is that she would move back to her mom within 6 to 9 months. So what are the things that, you know, again, in your discussion groups, what are the things that you might want to know more information on? What are the things you want to bring in from your experience in working with the youth and the family? So we will go to breakout, and then there will be an opportunity for folks, if you'd like to share out kind of what your thoughts were or any additional questions that come up. Quick, we were just diving in. Would folks like to share kind of the thoughts they had, the questions they had? Because our group, I know we were looking at the scenario and we had additional questions that we wanted to bring to the table. So feel free to take yourself off chat or raise your hand and we'll kind of look over the group and we'll give the share time about 10 minutes, so until about 3:05.
Yeah, actually, Shanna, yeah, that's fine. Do you want to, oh, 2 participants have their hands raised.
Okay. And Lucas.
Jen, do you want to unmute and tell us what you were commenting?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Since I have a lot of experience with IEPs and schools, the best suggestion that I have, anything that you want for your kiddo, you put it in an IEP. I'm on the east side, so we have problems with transportation. There aren't enough buses to get the kids to school, no bus drivers. So they're really strict on what they can do because they just don't have the resources. But anything that you want for that child, you put it in the IEP because then you have legal rights. They have to follow whatever's in the IEP. I gave an example of, I have a kiddo that needs to take, he's 7, so he's in the 2nd grade. He needs to take naps during the day. He sometimes has to sleep in because he's so tired. And that's in the IEP. So they give him a nap. He can take a nap during the day. And if he has to come in late because he's sleeping, he gets excused. There's no problem. But it's in the IEP. Anything you want, if they have an IEP, you have some legal rights. Put everything, I mean, even if you think it's a stupid thing and it's a little thing, put it in your IEP because then you can, you have some legal rights. So that's what I wanted to say.
And I think that's a really good point. It's not everything, unfortunately, we can get written into our IEPs, but there are accommodations that we can get included with our IEPs. And it's a really important to have the teacher, whomever is working with that student at that bid meet or that best interest determination meeting, because they may be doing accommodations or supports that are undocumented. And those things are really important to pass on to the next school team.
Skylar, I saw your hand up earlier. Did you have something?
Yeah, our team said what we want to know is what schools we're talking about and where they're located. We're talking about Renton Federal Way, and we don't know where mom's school would be. So what are those schools and what's the distance between them? Because of the transportation issue. And is the child currently receiving BRS services? And is the BRS services program or provider tied to the school, or could they be provided elsewhere? What supports are available at each location to help her catch up academically, like tutoring or whatever? And is her current school meeting her needs? And the people we think should attend the BED meeting would be the liaison from current school and potential new school, school staff, an IEP team, mom, foster care parents, social worker, and CASA.
Those are all
Wow,
great.
Skylar, we're going to put you in charge of training people from now on. Sorry, Shannon.
Oh, no, those are all great things. I was just going to say the same thing. Mom's location, like where she will be living, is a really, really important question because we're looking, the whole reason for having these meetings and determinations is about school stability. So looking forward as well, and how will that permanency plan and how will that move play into this as well is really, really important.
One of the things I wanted to mention, because it's gotten shared a couple of times, is at a recent best interest determination meeting, we had the director of special education, and then we had other school staff that said, you know, we don't have transportation, da, da, da. And she reminded us at that meeting that it is in the child's best interest. not in the school's best interest, in the child's best interest. So although transportation is an issue and for consideration, it should not be the primary reason to move or not move the child.
And this is probably a good time to mention that the school district is responsible by law for providing that transportation. So even if there is a school bus shortage, they can look at other options for providing transportation. Some districts use taxi cabs. Some districts will do an in lieu of contract with the foster parents or caregivers or family friends, and that person can drive the student back and forth to school. I've seen schools get really creative where, and they have to check in with their transportation folks, but sometimes they'll allow two school staff to transport a student because they're coming from the same direction. So while I understand the bus driver shortage and stuff, we need to encourage districts to come up, think outside the box, because we can't have these kids missing school.
Right, and also bus length of transportation time, of course, should be considered as part of the conversation, but it's not a determinant. We have some kids who travel a really what we would think a lengthy distance, but their connection to that school is really strong. They have, friends, extracurricular. They are connected and maybe have just three more months of that school year, as well as I've seen school teams and DCYF and caregiver teams pull together incredible plans for helping keep youth active or engaged while they're on a long bus ride, because being at that school and getting them there every day is important and it is in their best interest. So absolutely a consideration, should not be the determining factor.
One of the things I heard today, I was at a school liaison meeting in Whatcom County, is some schools are working towards getting a McKinney-Vento or a foster care bus, so it doesn't disrupt all the school routes as kids drop in and drop out. And one person is ultimately responsible for the McKinney-Vento and foster youth. So that route becomes a lot more flexible and negotiable. So just a thought.
Thank you, Debbie. Jen, you still have your hand up. Did you have an additional question?
Yes, when you talk about taxis and there's other, resources we could use, that's only for kids in the district. If you're at a school out of district, they don't transport.
So they are required to transport, even if the student is outside of the district. If they're in foster care, they have a right to transportation, even if they're 2 hours away. And again, it would depend on the student. Like Debbie mentioned, the student who was a senior in high school, and he did a really long commute every day because he wanted to graduate with his peers. But they're required by federal and state law to provide that transportation, even if they're outside of the district.
The problem is if you have a child with behavior problems, autism, and everything else thrown in there, if it upsets the school district, like because I went through this with buses, I can't get any buses. If you cause too many problems, and especially if you have a special needs kid, they can kick you out of the school district and tell you to go back to your home school.
Jen, was the kid you're talking about in foster care?
No.
Yeah, there we go.
So with a student in foster care, they have a right that's in federal and state law to be in that school of origin. If there are needs that are related to their disability, those should be written into an IEP, and they again have those rights. And then Peggy, do you want to talk about, I don't know if we have this in here, but there is a dispute resolution process, and that could be used even with a student who's not in foster care if you're in disagreement with the the school's plan.
Yeah, and it sounds like Jen was talking about a student who is not in foster care. So they are not required. And you're right, if a student is on a choice or boundary exception, a lot of times they have the parents and the student sign a contract so that if they get into any kind of trouble at school, they revoke the boundary exception. But for students in foster care, there is no boundary exception required.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. I didn't know the difference between the foster care in special education and the quote regular kids. So thank you for clarification.
I'd like to add one thing too from a case that I had involving trying to figure out where a student should be placed for a school district. The child was moved. She wasn't like miles wise, wasn't that far away from the school district she was being bused to. But when you start to factor in traffic, it was easily an hour on the bus just to get, the 10 miles back to her, her home. And so she would have these really early mornings and really late nights and not a lot of time with the foster family she was living with. And then she had a large sibling group and they all lived in different places. And so she would get picked up and then they'd go pick up other siblings to then go to visits with mom. And I think another factor that we have to be thinking about is how much time is a child spending in a vehicle every single day, especially when they are supposed to be going to a visit and their visit time is 3 to 4 hours in the car to be able to get to, and that would happen regularly. So that, that child, and then it made it so that the only way these kids could all see each other and their mom on the same day was to go on a weekend, and then their entire week is just gone. So just, making sure that we think about how much time a kid is spending in a car too, and whether or not that's good for them.
Yep, all those are key factors that all contribute to what's best for the child.
Heidi, I see your hand up, and then we want to take a quick break before we dive into resources. So go ahead, Heidi.
My cat just jumped up here. Sorry.
Oh, that's kitty.
I just wanted to add for specialized transportation, just keep in mind, I think that's a great idea to always look at an IEP and think about services, because you do have access to specialized transportation, but just to note that not all students will qualify for it. So if you have a student that's receiving like an academic intervention or academic minutes for like math, or maybe they get like speech services at school as part of the IEP, they're not going to qualify for specialized transportation. Like that's going to be reserved for students that need more support during their transportation, or, certain harnesses, or if they're in a wheelchair, or they need that level of support. And so, or for students that maybe have like behavioral struggles and they would do better with a smaller bus, having a para ride with them, things like that. So just keep that in mind. I would bring it up with the IEP team, with the IEP case manager always, and ask them what support could be put into the IEP for transportation. But just recognize that it's not as easy as, they really will have to qualify for that support, much like they would any other intervention in that IEP.
Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, let's take a quick break. We are going to come back and talk about all of the amazing resources that are available for students in foster care. We have Treehouse. We have Heidi from Treehouse who's going to share about Treehouse services. We have Dawn from WASAC who's going to talk about some post-secondary options. So come back. Let's come back at 3:15. It's 5 minutes. Is that good?
You want on? Oh, you.
Can I go potty without interruption?
That's how I feel too. So let's do 5 minutes. We'll come back at 3:15. Thanks, everybody. Savannah, can you go to the next slide?
Okay, I'm just going to go a little quick here because we are running out of time and I want the next two presenters to have some time. So real quick, we're just going to watch this cute little video from the Education Ombuds. If you're not familiar with them, there's their website. They service kids K through 12. If you have a student who has an IEP, they are incredibly helpful. They're for all students, but really have some great advice over kids in special ed. So Savannah, you want to play the video?
Many families and students don't feel prepared to navigate a lot of the complicated issues in our schools today. The Washington State Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds, or OEO, serves as guides for that process to help families, students, teachers, and community leaders feel confident in resolving their own problems, creating new solutions, and strengthening the family-school relationship. OEO is here as an impartial sounding board to listen to and understand your questions and concerns about our public K-12 schools, help you identify, understand, and evaluate possible options for resolving those concerns. Consult with families, educators, and others to clarify issues and facilitate direct communication between families and schools. Offer support and coaching on working through conflict and building effective communication. Provide information about public school processes and the rights and responsibilities of students and parents. Share best practices for increasing family engagement in schools. And make referrals to appropriate resources. OEO also holds workshops, trainings, and other events to help families and students understand how schools work. OEO even partners with policymakers and legislators to tackle opportunity gaps and make the system better. OEO doesn't offer legal advice or act as a lawyer or advocate for individuals or organizations, including students and parents. OEO is not here to enforce laws or regulations or investigate or make findings, and OEO can't make schools or districts take a particular action. All communications with OEO are confidential. We won't share information about a caller or student without getting written consent from a parent, guardian, or adult student. Call or email us today to get information about your issue, ask for a training, or just to bounce an idea off us. We have interpreters for families that speak languages other than English.
Stacy, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just saying OEO is great, so reach out to him if you have any questions. And then real quick, you might not be familiar with the OSPI website, but there is a page on special education. I'm just going to say one thing about this slide, the Special Education Resource Library. If you have any kids who have an IEP or in special education, when you get the slideshow, click on that Special Education Resource Library. It's alphabetical, and it has about every resource you could think around special education. So I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Heidi Hyatt from Treehouse.
Thanks, Stacy. I have to acknowledge and say that I was super excited to come because Ryan, I think I met you in 2008 when I first got involved with a CASA child advocacy program down here in Clark County. So I have 8 years working with our child advocacy program. And so I just want to take a moment to thank all of you. I really, really appreciate the work you do and kind of centering something that's really key to Treehouse, which is where we always try to center youth perspective and youth voice. And so I just really appreciate all of you that do that in centering youth and their best interests through the dependency process. So big shout out of gratitude to all of you. When I left our local child advocacy program, I switched over to Treehouse. I started off as an ed advocate. So I've been here since 2015. I'm currently a manager with our educational advocacy program. Go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. Okay, so anyone with a raise of hands, can you show me if you're familiar with Treehouse? You've worked with like an ed advocate or maybe a grad success coordinator. A couple folks. Okay, cool. Yay. I appreciate Tony, the hand clap. Thank you. So I have a very short kind of presentation. You all will get the slideshow. So I don't want to spend time really talking about referrals. That's kind of at the end. The key thing that you all should know as CASA, GALs, child advocates assigned to youth in care, is that you can make referrals directly for our program. So if you're working with a student and you look at this PowerPoint and you think, oh, maybe my youth or the child I'm working with would qualify for support, you can go ahead and go to our website, make a referral, and move forward in accessing that support for your child or youth that you're working with. Our mission at Treehouse is that we envision and strive to create a world where every child that has experienced foster care has the opportunities and support they need to pursue their dreams and launch successfully into adulthood. We align with the OSBI goal of by 2027, 90% of youth who've experienced foster care across Washington state will complete high school. We look at advancing equity and racial justice in that intersection of the education system and the child welfare system. Next slide. We have quite a few programs. I think all of these are considered statewide programs. There's different eligibility. We have staff. We have one main office in Seattle. All of our other staff and programs are located throughout the state. I think for most of you, probably the one that most of your youth are going to qualify for is our educational advocacy program. So this program's been around, Yana, 20 years? Yeah, a long time. Gosh, I think over 20 years now, 21. And this program serves students that are currently either in a shelter care or open dependency. So it's based on their legal status of being a dependent, and again, shelter care. We also serve youth in tribal foster care and youth in federal foster care. But really, I think just keep in mind with Ed Advocacy, we're focused on looking at there's an emergent educational issue, a barrier that's preventing a student from being successful in school. And so our referrals made to our program. We have 17 educational advocates throughout the state. So as long as it's a youth that meets that eligibility of federal, tribal, or open dependency, we will get an advocate assigned to their case. And the goal of the advocate is to reduce that barrier, help that student be successful, and doing the work through building the capacity of the adults that are around the youth. So we don't really even sometimes interact with the youth themselves. If it's an older youth, that may come to like an IEP meeting, or if we go to, sometimes we'll be invited to like FTDM meetings to talk about the educational component through a possible placement change. We may interact with this student, but for Ed Advocates, it's really focused on kind of working ourselves out of a job. Like we recognize if we can build the knowledge and skills of the adults that are supporting our students, then we're building many Ed Advocates that will continue not only to support that student, but also the other students that they're going to interact with or work with. Our grad success program is a high school program. So they're working with students in high school throughout the state. They are focused on doing direct kind of work with the youth. So they will interact with social workers and caregivers and monitor academic progress, monitor behavior, course completion, progress towards high school completion, giving those updates to the adults. But grad success is really focused on increasing the self-advocacy skills, supporting high school students in, again, removing barriers that are preventing them from being successful, but less focused on supporting the adults, more focused on that one-on-one support with the student. And then Launch Success is our program for youth that once they complete graduation success and they exit that program, it's a young adult program that helps launch youth into independent living. So they still do that self-advocacy work. They still work on skills setting. They provide support, financial support for helping reduce barriers. But I think it's from high school completion up to, I should jump ahead, I think it's 26 is that program. Yeah, 18 to 26 is the requirements for Launch Success. So tribal engagement is a program I'm really excited about. It's similar to graduation success. They're working with 8th grade through high school completion students, our Native youth. It's a culturally centered program. So it's really, they work really specifically on building relationships with tribes. and supporting students in having that holistic community support for our Native youth. So it's very similar to exactly what Grad Success is doing, but it's a very culturally centered program for our Native students. Next slide. This is the eligibility, so you'll have access to this slide. I'm not going to go over it. I think one of the things that I will kind of highlight is Launch Success, the young adult program. You self-refer because they're 18. For tribal engagement, it's the same as Grad Success. What I really appreciate about our high school programs is to qualify, the student has to be in an open dependency, again, federal foster care, tribal care. But once they're in Grad Success, they remain in the program past what their legal status. So if we get a student in 8th grade who's in a relative, with a relative caregiver, and let's say the case gets dismissed their sophomore year, their junior year, they get adopted or they go into a guardianship, but that open dependency goes away, they remain in our Grad Success or Launch or tribal engagement program. And I think that's just something that we're really happy about, because a lot of services tend to go away once cases are dismissed and youth are no longer in dependency. So thinking about some of the questions or the scenarios that were already presented, for a lot of you, like I was thinking, Gabriel, with like your toddler, the little one, if you, let's say, had concerns about concerns around speech or like occupational therapy or like motor skills, if you were concerned about any of that, you can make a referral to Ed Advocacy, and an advocate could come on board, connect with you, connect with social worker, caregiver, kind of learn a little bit more about what's happening, help give guidance on how best to work with the district to identify if future potential support is necessary. For those of you talking about like the best interest situations and school notification forms, and what we see on the advocacy side is we have a lot of highly mobile youth. We have a lot of youth that are changing placements, as you know, and what we are seeing, it seems higher to me this school year than before, but I don't know, maybe I'm just more sensitive this year to it, is we're seeing a lot of youth switch schools, and the new school didn't know that that student was receiving special services. And so our advocates are doing records requests from like one school before, two school before, and finding IEPs and taking them to the new school and getting those appropriate support plans put in place. And I think the biggest reason why that's happening is because these best interest meetings and school notification conversations aren't happening before a placement change happens. So that is something you can also reach out to Ed Advocacy. We can put you in touch with an advocate, your DCYF Ed leads as well, folks like Debbie throughout the region. Like, we can be just a one-time point person to help direct you on what should be happening. And if more direct service is needed, you have the ability to make a referral to our Ed Advocacy program. Next slide. So again, for making referrals, our Ed Advocacy, Grad Success, and Tribal Engagement are all accepted referrals, or we accept referrals from social workers, case managers, CASA child advocates, attorneys, our school district foster care liaisons, the school building point of contact, school staff, and then tribal and federal foster care caseworkers. And then with Launch Success, because again, the youth are 18, they can self-refer on the website. And next slide. I have the link in my final slide of the presentation is the information to our website to make referrals. I would suggest, if you do have a school age student, or you're a CASA that tends to you're going to be working multiple cases, you can go to our website and request an account just preemptively. You'll get an account made, and then that way you can easily, if an urgent educational need comes up, you can just pop in there and make the referral. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention about our two programs that really are kind of education focused. That's the Advocacy and the Grad Success programs. They kind of intersect. This year, we kind of opened both programs to do what we're calling dual enrollments, which I'm really excited about, because we had Grad Success. That program was developed, I think, gosh, I've been here 7 years. So I think it was about coming up to 10 years old, maybe. I think it's about, okay, good, Shannon. Then I'm going to say 10. You're done. That makes me feel good. All right, 10 years. With grad success, I think the idea, to be transparent, was that our ed specialists and coordinators would be the ed advocates for high school students. And what we've, come to find out is, like a lot of them are a lot of our ed staff in the high school program can advocate for IEPs, really understand discipline processes and procedures. But what's different is grad success staff work with the schools. So they're co-located, they're going out to these high schools, they're building relationships with those communities. And sometimes if the school's not doing something it needs to be doing, it can really jeopardize that relationship if that ed specialist is the one that has to push an issue further. So what we like to be able to do then is open up an enrollment with advocacy, and the advocate can kind of come in now and partner with that education specialist for those high school students and be the one to kind of advocate for things to move forward with the adults. So it really is kind of, I think, a better way to serve our youth and ensure equitable advocacy for all students pre-K through that high school completion. And the only other big difference really between those programs is, again, once a student is made eligible for grad success, there's no referral needed. We don't have to re-refer. They're in that program. They'll remain in that program. With advocacy, the way our contract is, we have to have a referral specifically to our program each year. So if you have a concern in September and make a referral, we're going to respond to it. Maybe we get involved. We resolve the issue in like November. If something else happens in March, you just need to let us know when we reopen it. But next school year, we would need a new referral to be eligible for support that year. So that's something to keep in mind. The next slide, please. Okay, so the other kind of probably more exciting thing, how much time do I have? I'm just blabbering. I didn't pay attention.
Can you be done at 3:34, 5?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to power through it. So there are financial support with Treehouse. I guess that's the takeaway. We have a statewide driver's assistance program. If you have an eligible student who wants to pursue getting their ID card, their learner's permit, pay for a driver's ed course, please have the youth or caregiver make a referral to our driver's assistance program. We have funding, and I'm going to just be transparent. Our referrals are a little bit low this year. So we really need support going out and telling youth that are experiencing foster care that they can get their driver's insurance reimbursed. I believe the reimbursement is like $225 a month for liability insurance, which is a huge barrier removal for young people. And that we will pay for those enhanced licenses, driver's license, and the learner's education, the driver's course. But that's a huge one I want to plug. We have a store located up in Seattle. So youth that are in our Launch Success, Grad Success program, they are eligible to shop in the store, to order clothing, toys, all sorts of stuff through the store. Ed advocates, our funding is a little bit different, but if you have a youth that's facing a barrier could be extracurricular activities, they need school supplies, books, toys. I've had young toddlers who are visually impaired, and advocates were working on putting early intervention plans together, and we were able to order books for children who are blind, right? As part of just being able to support the caregiver to do more at-home learning. So I ran out of time, but take a look at this slide.
Do you have a store? You have the question in the chat box. Is there a Treehouse store in Spokane?
No, but what we do is we do pop-up shops usually in August. So they just did one in August. I think they had like 100 kids from the Grad Success program come out and shop in a little pop-up shop. So a lot of our high school geo teams are starting to do pop-up shops more. You can still access the resources online by making a request for funding or to the store. I'll put my contact info in the chat. And so you can always just email me if you have a direct question about a student, a child that you're working with, and I can answer. And I'll stay on for the rest of the presentation if people have questions.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we love Treehouse. Treehouse is our favorite. Okay, we're gonna switch gears now, and we have Dawn Cipriano McCafferty here from WASAC, and she is gonna share about Passport to Careers. Dawn,
hi everyone. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for hanging with us this long. I really appreciate it. My name is Dawn Cipriano McCafferty, and I serve as the Assistant Director of the Passport to Careers program at the Washington Student Achievement Council. This is especially important. I think this is a really good opportunity to talk about the program because we recently surveyed students and found out that many of the students had never even heard of the Passport program. So what I ask you is for you to take this information, and even if you're working with, a preschool age youth or a young student, think about the networks that you're connected to and who you're working with. And, if nothing else, if you can't remember anything out of my presentation, remember the name, remember the name of the program, remember my name, and, just feel free to contact me. Peggy knows how to get a hold of me. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Next slide. So just really quickly, a little bit of the Passport program background. It was initially created about 15 years ago to help increase the pretty abysmal rates of college attainment for foster youth. And it's a multidimensional program that starts providing college and career preparation services to youth as young as age 13 through the setup program. So initially, the program served a really small population of students. It was probably about 300 each year. And that was because of the narrow definition of who was eligible for the program. But since then, the program has expanded pretty significantly. And I'll talk about that next. So next slide. So you can see here that back in 2018, the program opened up to serving not just state foster youth, but state, tribal, interstate compact placement of children, youth, and then federal foster care at any point after the age of 13. So that was one piece of the component. And then back in 2020, the program began serving youth who had experienced unaccompanied homelessness prior to after July 1st of the prior academic year. And then the other piece was that the program became, there were two pathways. So a student could either pursue a college program, or they could attend or participate in a registered apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program. Next slide. So as youth get to be about college age, there are other criteria for participating in the Passport program. You can see here that they do need to complete a FAFSA or WASPA. They need to attend an approved institution, post-secondary institution within Washington State. They cannot be pursuing a degree in theology because of Washington State's strict rule against the separation of church and state. They do need to be a Washington resident. They need to enroll in college prior to age 22. And then once they do enroll, they have 15 quarters of eligibility, so they can go for about 5 years. And then the scholarship expires when they're 26 years old. So you can see the program starts at 13 and goes all the way through age 26. Okay, next slide. Passport is a multi-dimensional program, and I'll review the different program elements in the next few slides. We can go on to the next one. As I had mentioned earlier, the first part of the program, Passport Pipeline, is the setup program. So students must be between the ages of 13 to 21 to participate in setup, and they have to be enrolled in a high school or GED program, and they need to be state dependents or in foster care in Washington State. And next slide. Currently, we have 5 providers throughout the state of Washington. Let's see, there's Catholic Charities in Yakima, Volunteers of America in the Spokane area, YMCA in Seattle, Pierce County Alliance in Tacoma, and then Community Youth Services in the Olympia area. I did want to bring that up, but you can also click on the link that's on this slide that will take you directly to those providers. So essentially, these providers, they serve about 350 students each year, and they do things like help the student with developing a post-high school plan. They help them complete admissions applications, help them get connected to our apprenticeship contractor. They do financial aid applications, all types of things. And then they do work very closely with Treehouse staff and collaborate there as well. And next slide. In regard to the passport to college piece, once a youth enrolls in college, they're eligible to receive a $5,000 scholarship for up to 5 years. Last year, we served about 945 students in colleges, and then an additional 32 students participated in a pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship program. The scholarship is better than, like you hear about tuition waivers, but this is better than a tuition waiver because it helps cover more than just tuition. It does tuition, fees, books, housing, transportation, and then some personal expenses as well. And it acts in combination with other state financial aid, such as the Washington College Grant or the College Bound Scholarship, which you might have heard of. So students who have College Bound, Passport, and Washington College Grant, they have pretty robust financial aid packages that can help them pay for their college tuition. And then just some information here about what we, the amount of money that we provided in scholarships, and then what we provided in support services, which I'll talk about next. So additionally, institutions sign an agreement where they say that we're going to invest in these students, and they create a student support plan where they're providing pretty intensive support to passport eligible students. In addition to that, we know that the campus staff are trained in serving passport eligible students, so they're sensitive to the needs of our student population. And then if a school does agree and they sign on to this basically contract that we have, the state provides the institution with student support funds. So the institution can then use those funds to help students overcome barriers, such as like if they need tutoring, or if they need help with, covering their rent for a month, or like I just had a request come in, a student, needed their car to come to school and they blew a head gasket. So they're using that money to help cover those expenses so that it doesn't create a barrier for the student to complete their degree. And then next slide. So passport to apprenticeships, the second pathway. If a student is interested in working in a trade or pursuing an apprenticeship, they're also able to receive support from the Passport to Careers program. Funding is available to help students cover things such as tuition fees, work clothes, rain gear, boots, and occupation-related tools. WASAC contracts with an organization called ANEW. They're based in the Seattle area, and they do the program administration for Passport to Apprenticeships. Next slide. And then, so I just really quickly, I know when we say the word apprenticeships, we're thinking like construction and manufacturing, but apprenticeships can be very, very broad. There's some barbering, there's some healthcare issues, healthcare programs, IT programs. Although ANEW is based in the Seattle area, they are able to help students make connections throughout the state. Now, this slide just provides you with a little bit of background information about ANEW, the organization, and then it provides you with the contact information for the apprenticeship navigator at ANEW. Next slide. So program definitions, I know a lot of you probably already are very familiar with this, but I did want to add the definitions to the presentation so that you can go back and reference it in the future if you need to. And then next slide. So again, these are just the way WASAC defines state foster care, tribal foster care, federal foster care, the Interstate Compact of Placement of Children, and then unaccompanied homelessness. So this is how the Passport program defines these different categories. Then we can go to next slide. This slide talks to you about the unaccompanied homeless youth, and this is where we get a lot of our questions. So basically unaccompanied, clearly not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, and then homeless. These are just some examples of what we're looking at when we're making that definition or determination for eligibility of the program. 99.9% of the time, the college financial aid office or a new will make that determination as to whether or not the student qualifies as a passport student based on their unaccompanied homeless status, just because they're already going through that process in packaging the student's financial aid. And we really don't want to put the students through any extra, we don't want to make them have to jump through any other hoops. So this is, we're trying to streamline the process to keep it as simple as possible for the student and the financial aid office as well. And next slide. So with Passport, there is a huge network of community partners that are involved in the work that we're doing in some capacity. And then the next few slides are just going to show you, just give you a glimpse as to what exactly I'm talking about. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. So the Passport Leadership Team is a programs advisory group. It's made up of a diverse group of people representing colleges, social services, state agencies, the tribes, and apprenticeship programs. We do meet on a quarterly basis, but we have 3 subcommittees. You can see here, there's the data work group, the infrastructure work group, and the advising work group. And the 3 subgroups meet much more frequently so that we're able to, provide reports out at the Passport Leadership Team meetings and to, really make progress on the work that we're trying to do. And then these are just some examples of the work that we've done. We've done strategic planning, some policy advising, lots and lots of resource development, which I'll show you in another slide. Training opportunities. We have a ton of webinars available, and we have our annual Passport conference. So there's a lot available to you. The next slide. The regional teams. So Debbie, you're part of the Northwest Washington regional team, I believe. So these are smaller groups that are part of the Washington Passport Network. And, I'd like to invite you, if it's something that you're interested in, you can contact me and I'll get you connected to the people that are facilitating each regional group. Each group is they have their own agenda. They're some groups are meeting quarterly, some groups are meeting monthly, and they're basically looking at what their region needs to support their students. And then they address those needs. And again, like I said, the projects vary by region. And for example, one of the things that I know was done in the northeastern region of the state was they did a new student orientation. I believe that there's a guidebook or manual that's being created too for the adults that are supporting these students. And yep, I think that's it. So next slide. These are resources again that are available to you. The WASAC website, which is the first one that I have listed, is primarily focused toward, it has information for students and then the adult supporters that are in their lives. There's a Passport student guide available, which has a ton of information. There's some outreach flyers that you can use, and then a list of frequently asked questions. Now, the Washington Passport Network website is, the content is really, it's not aimed for students. It's aimed at college administrators and then the adult supporters that are supporting the students. There's a link to our trainings. Everything is on YouTube, and you can review the recordings that we've posted previously. There is also an emergency funding request form there. So in that circumstance, a student would access the site. So if a Passport eligible student runs into a need and they need emergency funding rapidly, they can apply for the emergency funding, and the College Success Foundation will provide that support to them. And then again, there's important forms that the adult supporters could use with their eligible students. And yeah, that's it. I totally encourage you to check out both websites so you can get familiar with it. And then I have to tell you about the Passport Conference. It's 2 days in SeaTac this year, May 23rd and 24th. It's usually a really, really good conference. I, again, invite you to participate. The more information will be on the Washington Passport Network website. And yeah, we really look forward to getting everybody together then. And shameless plug, we're still accepting workshop proposals. So there was an RFP that went out. We're going to be accepting them until November 8th. We are looking for people to present. So, you know, if you feel like you're an expert in an area and you feel comfortable presenting, we welcome it. Go ahead and submit the proposal. And then, like I said, we have tons of recorded webinars that are on our YouTube channel. And you can see here, the link is available to all of you. And feel free to check it out. But that's it. Thank you so much. I tried to get through this really quickly.
You did great. You did great. Thank you, Dawn. And I was putting the links in the chat box as you went. So nice job. Lots of information.
Take a big deep breath.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Savannah, you want to go to the next slide? Oh.
Absolutely. So I hope what you heard from Dawn's presentation is that there are supports available for students who want to enter into post-secondary or want to look into training and apprenticeships. And as Dawn mentioned, we are not a waiver state, but we have so many opportunities for youth and scholarships and grants that they can apply for, that if they know about those, which is where you can have some impact and kind of helping them do that research or pointing them to one of us, it's very likely that their college tuition and cost of attendance, which are all those other things that go into actually supporting a student, can be paid for. The education and training voucher, and I will not go through all of these slides, but I just want you to know that DCYF has a program for students. It's an education and training voucher program. And this again is also for college, technical college, vocational. And once a student gets their award letter from the colleges that they would like to attend, as they're looking at those award letters, if they have an unmet need, ETV can provide up to $5,000 a year in support. It's not just for tuition, it is for fees, housing, rent, books, transportation, groceries. It's very flexible. It's given directly to the student over the, broken up over the course of that year through this semester. And both Passport and ETV have a joint application, which can be found on the DCYF website. So it used to be on independence.wa.gov website. We recently, just this last month, transferred all of that information for independent living, for supports, and this application process over to the DCYF website. We'll go to the next slide. And again, you're getting these slides and all the information is on our website. There is specific eligibility criteria. It is a little bit different than Passport. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it is on here. It is on our website. It'll be in this presentation. Can we go to the next? So this is really important. One, the FAFSA already opened October 1, so students can go online and fill out the free application for financial aid. And in January, the registration for ETV or that application opens on the 1st. So there is a deadline for getting that application in. It's a priority deadline. So as long as there's funds available, we will continue to take applications. And I will say that there almost always is funds available all the way up to the beginning of the next school year. Because what we do find is so many students are actually going through that process. And ETV folks have great relationships with the school financial aid folks. And so a lot of times the school financial aid folks will see something come through and they'll go, oh, you haven't applied for this, or you haven't applied for this. And so by the time sometimes we get that application, our students' needs are already met. But just to know there are some deadlines, priority deadlines around the application. Yes, to be once a student puts in, and this goes for FAFSA or anything, once a student puts in an application, anytime, reminding them anytime there's a changed email information, that that should be passed on to the programs they're working with. Go ahead to the next. So this program is unique in that it also works for students who are doing Running Start or college in the high school. Students are eligible up to $2,000. And this would be for other things listed here: books, supplies, school fees, transportation, a bus pass, parking pass, gas or car repairs, anything that helps them engage. A lot of times Running Start programs are, they're paid for by the college, but there's other things that are needed to engage. And so ETV can help with those pieces as well. And here's our wonderful ETV team. I'm actually not part of it, but none of them were available today. So we wanted to make sure you still got this information. Kathy Ramsey is our wonderful program manager. Victoria Ackerman is a program coordinator, and Aubrey Schlottman is our program specialist. So all of these folks are their contact information here, but it's also on the DCYF website. If you search ETV, they can answer any questions. The other thing that I love about the ETV program is that they're not just an ATM. They actually do monthly outreach with all the students that are enrolled in their program. And they help to, you know, talk about overcoming barriers or supports, make sure they're connected with their college. So there is a very social service piece to the ETV program as well. That's extremely valuable. So I think I did it. There we go.
Okay, so we're almost done. Hang in there. But we did want to let you know about this fun thing that we're working on. So we're in the process of creating a week-long arts camp for foster care students at Centrum. And Centrum offers campus-based arts education, and they have professional teaching artists that come in which engages students to develop a stronger understanding of the arts and its importance in relation to learning and self-expression and building relationships with other students who have similar experiences. So students will have the opportunity to learn more about Washington State history because they are on this beautiful campus, which is actually the lighthouse in the picture. It's in Fort Worden in Port Townsend. It's going to be a beautiful setting. It's going to be April 2nd through the 7th, and the age group will be 5th, 6th graders through 9th grade. Sibling groups will be included, and we need help. We need chaperones, and we need 4 more dorm counselors. Counselors are on duty from 5:45 p.m. to 7:30 in the morning, but they are paid. They're paid $700 per the 5-day program. So it'd be I think like $140 a night. Chaperones are not paid, and they're on duty from 8:15 in the morning to 1:30 in the afternoon, and on an as-needed basis. And those are volunteer positions, but housing and food is included. So I've put my contact information on there, and I've put Alyssa's on there. So when you get this slide, if you're interested in learning more about those positions and what it entails, please send me an email or send Alyssa an email, because we really want to make sure that we can do this arts camp. We can't do it without you guys helping us. So please consider volunteering. Next slide.
Beautiful, beautiful setting. Peggy and I were able to go and spend a day there a few years ago. It was so fun. The kids were having a blast. Counselors were really dedicated. There are tons of fun activities, and it's just a beautiful setting.
Yeah, and it's all kinds of arts. It's not just, you know, painting or drawing. There's also dance and music. So it's just going to be a great opportunity for the kids. So here is a slide that you can click on these links when you get the slide deck and reach out to any of us. That's just a little bit more information for you with some websites you can visit. Next slide. And there's Shanna's contact and my contact information. Next slide. And then Peggy, did you want to cover this one?
Yes, sorry, I was putting the link to the OSPI website in the chat. We always just put this at the end of any presentations that include data so that everybody knows where the data came from. And it's that state level data sharing agreement I talked about before. And thank you to all of you for joining us on a very long afternoon. We all hung in there. I'm really proud. And I just want everyone to know, that all of the advocates to know that we appreciate the work that you're doing to support these kids. And if you have questions, reach out. I think we can stick our email addresses in the chat box, but I think Ryan's getting this PowerPoint to everybody. So that's what we've got. Ryan, do they need to do anything before they log off?
I don't think so. I think that's it. Thanks everyone for sticking in there. They all had said, this is kind of the last session of this year's conference. There's a mental health advocacy piece tomorrow, but that's for a very small number. So yeah, I was actually working on trying to get all this stuff posted up to the website as soon as possible. I'm hoping to have everything up there by tomorrow so that you guys will have access to that as well. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Anyone else?
Thank you to Heidi and Dawn for coming and joining and powering through all that information too. And all of the slides will be, Ryan will get them up.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you.